Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our SharePoint Empowerment webinar for today. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we. Sorry about that. Um, Thank you guys for joining so much. We're so excited to share the SharePoint webinar with you. A couple of housekeeping things. I am recording the webinar, and we'll share the link with you guys after the webinar is done. And there will be time for questions at the end. We got a lot to cover today, so I'm gonna try to spend the right amount of time and then give you guys a little bit of time for questions at the end. We'll have a little bit of a presentation, and then I'll hop right into the demo. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So today what we're going to be talking about, what is SharePoint? We hear Microsoft is really good at naming a bunch of things the same thing, and there's a lot of confusion around specifically what is SharePoint, why would we use SharePoint versus having a file server like we used to do, or having data that or files that are just on our desktops that we email around. What about OneDrive? SharePoint and OneDrive kind of get talked about interchangeably, so what is the difference there? Then we'll dive right into the demo, and I've got a lot of things that I want to show you. I'll try to hit some high points. I'll also try to get detailed and show you some advanced features as well. Lastly, we'll come back into the presentation and talk through some resources, some helpful resources that we'll share with you, some sites for training, as well as some kind of technical information, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we'll get started. So what is SharePoint? And I pulled this right from Microsoft's website, but a SharePoint site or website is a site in Microsoft Office 365 that helps people and teams work together and stay informed. That's their really long way of saying it's a collaboration tool where you can work with your partners, your external customers, your contractors, or even your own employees to get work done and to do that as efficiently as possible. SharePoint was designed for team, department, or project collaboration with integration between a lot of the other Microsoft technologies, Microsoft Teams, Office 365 groups, and the like. And then sites can have different permissions. So either by the whole site, meaning you can give people in your organization access to a site, or you can also give external people access to whole sites so that you can collaborate together. But you can also separate or segment permissions inside of a SharePoint site and give access only to the data that a certain resource or role needs to be able to work inside of SharePoint or collaborate together. Why SharePoint? SharePoint is a streamlined and efficient collaboration, or enables streamlined and efficient collaboration with team members and customers, both in allowing real-time editing of Office files together. So if you're working on a big proposal and you need 3 or 4 people to weigh in, then you can all watch as the proposal is updated and edited and changed and modified and images added. PowerPoint presentations, if you have a big webinar such as this one, like we did, or if you are doing a presentation with your client, you can update numbers real time and have those be reflected across the whole team. Integration with Teams and other Office 365 apps and areas allows you to really work on or see the data that you need very quickly. Microsoft Teams has kind of become the hub of communication and collaboration for people in Office 365, and SharePoint works right alongside that to give you access to the data that you need when you need it. You can have access to your files and data anywhere that you have an internet connection, literally around the world. So before, we had file servers where all of our documents and data were stored. And if we traveled, went on vacation, went on some sort of client meeting or to some sort of event, then we would have to VPN back into our server and wait as large files transferred over the VPN so that we could open them and edit them. And heaven forbid we were on a plane or something like that where we couldn't actually edit things offline. So that was the old world, and now we actually have access to files and folders anywhere, including offline, if we sync them down to our local computers. Versioning allows us to always be able to get back to a previous version of files. I don't know if you guys are like me, but if you use a previous document as a template for a new document and then realize about halfway through that you've been editing and saving over the old document and the frustration creeps in, in SharePoint, you can always get back to that. Versioning is enabled by default, and every time you make a change to a file, that a new version is stored. So no matter who in the organization might have caused an oops, you can always get back to that, including deleting files as well. And then lastly, local synchronization will allow you to work with documents and data in traditional ways. So that kind of local editing experience. We get a lot of questions about, if I go to SharePoint, is it web only? Because we have big Excel spreadsheets and, using a web browser is just not the best format for that. You can use SharePoint and still edit and work with your documents in the traditional way of opening it locally with the speed of that. So those are just a few of the really good reasons why SharePoint is a really good solution for small businesses. So what about OneDrive? Is that not the same thing? Is it different? And if it's different, how is it different? So whereas OneDrive or SharePoint is all about collaborating with your team members and your partners and your customers, OneDrive is cloud and synced storage of business, and what I say is business personal documents and data. Because we're talking about the business world, we're not talking about pictures of our children or our sons or family members. We are talking about business documents, things that you might store in your personal documents on your computer. Now you can store in an area that is only for you, and by default, no one has access to those documents and data except for people that you share. Which leads to the next bullet point. Documents and folders can be shared with others, including coworkers and the outside world. So you still can share things that you've been working on in your OneDrive area. And the other really nice thing is there are native OneDrive apps for all of the platforms that you use, including both Windows and Mac, Android and iOS. All of those platforms have native OneDrive apps that allow you to sync data locally, as well as edit and view that data. So that's OneDrive, and SharePoint is then, again, about team collaboration. So if we continue on here, as I mentioned, there are native apps for all of the OneDrive, native OneDrive apps for all of the platforms that you might use. There's a URL there, and again, we'll share this presentation so you don't have to write that down. But if you don't already have the OneDrive app on your whatever the device that you're using, that'll get you to it. The other nice thing about the OneDrive app, which is kind of confusing, is that you can sync both your personal OneDrive, your business OneDrive, as well as any SharePoint document libraries that you might have access to. One second here. Okay. In terms of SharePoint functionality, as we mentioned, with OneDrive, the same features apply. So you still can share data with each other and with external people using SharePoint. You can sync your access to your documents and your files using the OneDrive apps, including files on demand, which means that you don't have to actually sync everything. You can access data and it is synced for you as you need it. And then one of the things that I'll demo later is that at the top of every Office web application or website, Microsoft Office 365, there is a search bar, and that will search across all of the SharePoint sites that you have access to. Also, SharePoint is about more than just documents. A lot of times we find that our clients get to SharePoint to replace file servers that are local and to be able to decommission those file servers. But SharePoint sites are about more than just documents. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the additional things, and I'll even demo a few examples, real world examples that we use for SharePoint. Another really nice feature is that SharePoint documents can be checked out for exclusive use. So if it's a document and you need to make changes without people being able to see those changes, or without people overwriting the changes that you made, you can check out documents so that people can only read the previous version of the document until it's checked back in. The other nice thing about that is administratively, if someone checks out a document, goes on vacation, hasn't edited the document in 2 weeks or something like that, you can always undo their checkout. And then lastly, as we talked about before, Office documents can be edited together with live updates. So as you're editing the document, everyone else is seeing your changes. They can make changes as well, and you can kind of collaborate and work together. So, to kind of further explain the difference. So OneDrive is only for documents, as kind of a summary. OneDrive is only for documents, and SharePoint is really about group collaboration. It's a group collaboration platform that includes document storage, but has additional capabilities as well. Similar features are available in both, including local sync as well as an identical sharing model. And the thing that I always like to say in these empowerment sessions is that OneDrive is actually a SharePoint site by itself that's just limited to only your access. So behind the scenes, it's actually the same underlying technology, which is why they work and play well together, and the sharing model and everything are exactly the same. All right, so I thought we would hop out of our presentation and hop into what you probably are here for, which is the demo. Get back to that in a second. All right, so let me head back over. I've got a demo site here that I use, and so we'll hop in there real quickly and I'll walk through some examples. So this fictitious company Microsoft uses a lot is called Contoso Electronics, and they created it. They own the domain name. It's just for their demo purposes. So we have an access to a demo tenant that we can share with you. So you may or may not already know that everything in the Office 365 world is available via one site, and that is just office.com. So if you log into office.com with your existing Office 365 credentials, if you have them, then you'll be able to get to any of the applications that are in the Microsoft ecosystem that you have access to, which is really nice. So for our purposes, obviously we're here to talk about SharePoint, and so there is a SharePoint link as well. So from SharePoint, if I click on the SharePoint link, then what it will take me is to the home area or the pinned site area of SharePoint. I'm going to talk a little bit about the confusion there because I know a lot of our clients have confusion around the home or the root of SharePoint. So I'm going to show you both and try my best to explain what the difference is, but it is incredibly confusing, and I really hope Microsoft fixes that. So depending on how you get to SharePoint, you're either going to see this set of pinned sites as well as news from around all the sites that you have access to, or you will also see, if I just go to the root of the site, which would be yourcompany.sharepoint.com. So you probably already know that. Let me open up another tab and go just to the root. Then notice that it's different. And so what in the world? What's the difference between going to the root of the SharePoint site and getting to this set of pinned sites? Because we oftentimes get questions about how to access the sites that users create or that you create and want to use. So the root of the SharePoint URL or the root site is actually in and of itself a site. SharePoint is very hierarchical. And what I mean by that is SharePoint sites can actually contain other sites. Think of it like on, in your documents folder on your computer, you can have a folder called documents, and inside that you have another folder, and it can be named clients, and inside that you have a folder for a client, and inside that maybe you have a folder for a project of some kind. In this world, SharePoint sites are kind of like those folders in that SharePoint sites can be nested inside of each other. So you can really get very granular in how you create your, what we typically call information architecture. So at the root of SharePoint is in and of itself a site, but because Microsoft wanted to make it a little bit easier to be able to get to all the sites that you have access to, they created this little landing page that has all of the sites that you've either been to frequently or sites that you've pinned that you're following. So for the purposes of our demo today, we're going to be talking about two sites, probably the SharePoint the sales and marketing site, as well as this project site. And so if I favorite them both, which means I just put a star or check the star in both, then now notice that it says that I'm following them. That's going to affect the news that I see around SharePoint, but it also will put it at the top of my list so that I can get back to it very easily. So if you ever find yourself in the SharePoint root site, if you go back to office.com, click on SharePoint, it's going to take you to this site, and you'll see the sites that you're looking for. So I know that's probably still confusing, but just to hopefully try to help explain the difference. So we're going to go into one of the sites that we have access to. And you'll notice that this is going to look, other than the color scheme, very, very similar to most of the sites that you would get to in SharePoint. You can customize the site and change the color scheme of the site if you want, and I'll talk about customization in just a little bit. But for right now, this is the site that we're going to focus on, and this is a SharePoint site for this company, Contoso's sales and marketing team. To start showing you down the left-hand side, this is going to be minus a few items. This is going to be the default set of menu options that are going to be on all brand new sites that you create. Getting back to home, there'll always be a shared notebook that gets created, a OneNote notebook, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. A default document library called Documents will get created every time you create a SharePoint site. Product list is something custom for this team, and we'll talk about that in a second. Pages, which are just standard web pages like you're used to with any public website, you can get to there under Pages. Site contents will show you all of the contents of the site, regardless of whether or not they are in the menu system on the left. And then Recycle bin is anything that's been deleted. If you're not an owner or an administrator of a SharePoint site, you won't see this edit button, and you won't see the edit over here on the right. So if your view looks a little bit different for any of the sites that you have, that's probably why. Because I'm logged as an owner of the site, I see a little bit more in terms of the content, and I wanted to be able to show you a lot of those things, or some of those things. So like any traditional website, clicking on any one of these menu items is going to open up that area inside of your site. And in this case, again, I'm going to start with the thing that's most common, which is a document library. And think about this like a shared network drive that you might have on a file server that you might be familiar with, or if you are used to Dropbox or Box or any of the file sync and share applications, this is very akin to that. And so this here we have a folder for general monthly reports, rebranding, some PowerPoint, anything that might be in our kind of sales and marketing for this company. So if I just click on a document, and this is another kind of point of confusion that we talk about a lot here at our company. If I click on a document, it's going to open that in the online version of the Microsoft app that it was written in. So this was a PowerPoint file, and you'll notice that I'm still in the browser, and it's opening the PowerPoint inside of the web, right, in PowerPoint Online. So a lot of you, most of you, have the desktop versions of the apps, and the experience, while it's as feature rich or as in terms of feature parity, is as close as Microsoft can make it, it's still web-based. And so the desktop version is probably what you're more familiar with. So if I accidentally get to an online version, the online version of the apps, then all I have to do is click the drop down and click open in desktop app. And that's going to open the file then on my computer in the traditional way that I'm familiar with. But there's another way to not have to get through this online editing version. So if I go to, let's do a Word document now. If I click the little three dots to the right of, or hover over to the right of the file name, then you'll notice there's a really big menu, and we'll kind of cover some of these as much as we can. But if I hover over open, then now I can pick, do I want to open it in the browser, or do I want to open it in the app that it was written in? So if I click open in app, then it's going to say, hey, we're trying to open Word. Is that okay? If this is your site and you always want, you don't want to see these anymore, if you click always allow to open links, then you'll never see this again. Click open, and then I'll drag this over. As soon as it gets open, you'll see that Microsoft Word in the background is, here we go. And I'm logged in as Megan, so it's going to open as her. And here is the Word document, this product overview document, and it's in Microsoft Word, just like I would expect. All of the office productivity applications that Microsoft has written, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, they're all incredibly SharePoint and OneDrive and Office 365 aware. So when I save this, it's going to go right back into SharePoint, meaning no longer do I have to download something from the web, open it in my desktop app, save it, and then remember to either upload it back to somewhere or to share it via email with 30,000 people and not remember which version is the latest version, because we got 14 different versions that are attached to 14 different emails. So I can make some changes if I wanted to, and when I save that, just changing something somewhere. The other thing that I'll point out is that when you open something from SharePoint or OneDrive, by default, autosave will be turned on. And so that means that this file, the moment that I stop making changes for just a second, it's going to start to send those changes back to the cloud. That is one of the things that enables this kind of real-time editing between multiple people. If someone else were in this document with me and we were editing together, I would see their little icon here right next to the share icon. And so that way I know how many people are here, and wherever they're editing, it's going to color that section a different color just temporarily so that I can see that that's the change that they made. If you don't want to enable autosave, I strongly recommend that you do, but if you choose not to enable autosave, then you can turn that off here, and it's going to tell you we've already saved your edits. You can undo or use version history to return to an earlier version. I'll talk about that in a second. But now I've got to remember to save my changes. So if I get rid of Jason, and really what I meant to say was Megan, then this little saving doesn't happen. And if I were to accidentally close and not save my changes, those would be lost. So I have to remember to go in and click save, and now it's going to save just like before. The thing about autosave, and I mentioned it or alluded to it a little bit before, is that if you open another document from SharePoint, let's say you have a client proposal that was the last one that you did, you made a bunch of changes and you want to save it for the next client proposal, and you open it up and you start making changes, it's going to save right over the one that's in SharePoint because autosave will get to it before you turn it off. And so we get a lot of frustration about that. So the solution is either to turn autosave off, or if you accidentally made a change, then if you click the drop down here at the top and click version history, it's going to show you all the different versions that were changed, right? So this change is the one that Megan made today, and it was in error. So if I go back to Alex's version and click open version, notice that then I'm going to scroll down. There's not that word Jason or Megan here that I had changed. I can either compare and it'll show me some of the changes that were made across the versions, or if I know this is the good one, I can click restore. And that's going to create a brand new version right on top of the version that I last saved. And so the one that had my name or Megan's name on it would be a version, and then there'll be a brand new version that's the one before. So it kind of leapfrogs back to that version. So it's a little bit confusing, but hopefully as you get to working with data and files in SharePoint and OneDrive more often, you'll get familiar with that dance. I do it all the time. I have to go in and go back to my previous version, and hey, I just am used to it. But it's hard to undo 10 to 15 years worth of editing Office documents the same way overnight. So that is the kind of the tight integration between editing data in SharePoint or storing data in SharePoint and then editing it locally on my Office application. So then if I go back into my SharePoint document library, you'll notice that a few seconds ago, Megan edited this document and I didn't have to go and save as or move files or anything like that. So what you saw me do was really mostly online. I went and navigated to a site, I went to a document library, I edited the document, I opened it locally, but that seems, especially for day in and day out editing of Excel files, or if I'm an accountant and I've got tons of files, that seems a little less efficient than what I used to do, which is go to my local file system, open the file, edit it, save it, and I'm done. I have good news. We can actually sync this document library local to our computer. So if I click this sync icon, it's going to tell me it's getting ready to sync. It's going to connect to OneDrive on my computer. And then on the other screen, which you can't see, OneDrive opened really quickly and it tells me I'm now syncing sales and marketing. So if I open up Excel and I'll drag this Explorer window over here, you'll notice that now I have a second. So here's my OneDrive that we were talking about before. I do have a conflicted copy from a previous demo, so I'm sorry about that. I should have got rid of that. But this is this folder here, this Contoso, which would be named your company name, is anything that was synced locally from a SharePoint document library. So now I have sales and marketing, which is the site, -documents. That will be the same naming convention that you have across all of your syncing, the site, and then the document library that you've chosen to sync. So if I did another, let's say I did HR documents, I would see HR-documents, sales and marketing -documents, and on we go. If I go in here, then you'll see, and granted, like I said, I've got a conflicted copy here, but that's from a previous demo. But if I come back here, you'll notice that the document library and what's online is exactly the same. So as things are changed here, they would be synced down. Also, the status, so let me right click here and view sync problems so I can clear this up. Let me resolve these just so we can get rid of those. So that way we can see pretty clean. I'll keep both files so that I can talk about that real quick. So let me right click, fix sync problems, keep both files. So that way I want to, so now notice what happened. If you are offline when you edit documents and you come back online and someone has edited it, right, that real-time syncing didn't happen because let's say I was on a plane and I didn't want to pay GoGo for the wireless. When I come back, it's going to save, if you want it to. If you don't know what the changes were, then you can save it as a separate copy. And so you'll see the same file name, and then this is the name of my computer because I went to Georgia Tech, and so hey, of course. So then I can open up both. I can delete one once I figure out what the right one is. So it gives me the ability to not ever lose versions of documents that I've made. So because the last or the worst possible thing is that somebody spent hours and hours saving or editing a document, and all of a sudden now it's gone. Also, a couple of things. This status column that will show up once you sync a document library from SharePoint or once you sync OneDrive will by default be cloud. It will be a cloud, which means that even though it's showing me the file names and the sizes and all that like it's there, it's actually not there until I open it. It's stored in the cloud. And the reason that this is done is to save you disk space. As you use SharePoint more and more and have tons of document libraries across tons of SharePoint sites, you could quickly fill up a hard drive if you had to sync everything in order to make a few changes. So by default, this feature is called Files on Demand. It's enabled, and it only will download the file when you double click it. So notice there, the little change there, and now we have the green icon. That means that it's on my computer, but it's not set to always keep on my device. So I'm going to close that file down. And then if we know that these monthly reports we edit all the time, we want them to always be on our computer, we want to work on them offline in an airport or something like that, I can right click and click always keep on this device. And that's going to tell the OneDrive Sync app to go ahead and download all the data. And you'll notice that when that finishes, the icon is different. Now it's a colored in green checkbox instead of a white one. And that means I've chosen to always keep data here. So it's always available. It's very quick. I can open up these files and they are local. They open very quickly because they're already stored on my computer. So notice how quickly that happened. Okay. So a little sidebar. I know it's not completely about SharePoint, but as you use SharePoint for documents and data, you're going to run into these things, and I wanted to make sure that you had that knowledge. So if your hard drive does start to fill up, or if you roll off of a project, or you're done with that initiative and you might want it to stay in SharePoint, but you don't need it on your computer all the time, you can reverse the process by right-clicking and clicking Free Up Space. Now, that's not going to delete the data out of SharePoint. That's just going to send them back to the cloud, and you can still get to them and revisit the process just like we did before. You'll still have access to them. They're still stored there. Okay. All right. So that's really how we generally work with documents and data in a SharePoint document library. If I want to go the old kind of web way, I can always upload files and folders via the web, although it's not quite as efficient as just copying data from my local computer into a synced document library. But web-based access to upload data is still available, especially if you're on another computer. You're at someone else's office, something like that, and you just need to get some files quickly into SharePoint. You always have the web view to be able to do that. All right, so that is document libraries in SharePoint. But the question that we come back to is, SharePoint is about more than just document libraries. As you can see here on my home page of this sales and marketing site, there's a lot more information here. There's news that we could have. You can see a section for news, a section for quick links. So it seems like we can have some links to other content around the web. And also, as you notice here, there's an activity section by default, which tells me things that are edited most recently, especially if you're on larger teams or you're on teams where you collaborate together. This can be a really easy way to see what's been modified recently so that you can either view it to see what changed or to continue to interact with files that you edit most often, because they're going to be right there top of the activity. So you can see that as we've walked around these files, they show up at the top of the list. That's not by surprise. We've been editing these files, and so they are the files that have been active most recently. To head back up to the top real quickly before I forget, remember I talked about this search bar at the top of all Office 365 apps. To prove it, I'm going to click through. So you see there's a search bar here. There's a search bar here. Anywhere that we are in Microsoft 365, you'll see that there's a search bar. That's going to search all of Microsoft 365, or if you are inside of a site, then by default, it's going to search this site, right? And so if I am looking for USA Sales, for instance, because we just changed that, and I search for that, then you'll notice it's going to show me inside of here the one file that I have access to. So that can be really helpful for when you're inside of a site, or contextually to be able to get to that. But if you don't know where it's stored, so in general, you have lots and lots of data inside of SharePoint, and you want to be able to search across all of your SharePoint sites. If you go back up to office.com, it can be faster to actually search. Let me see. So if I search for my company name, which in this case is Contoso, you'll notice that it's searching for everything across all sites. Now it is permissions based, so if I have an executive or an administrative area that my end users shouldn't have access to, then it is going to not show me that data. But I can also filter. So if I know that I'm looking for an Excel file, then if I apply the Excel filter, now I'll only see Excel files that either mention Contoso or have Contoso in the name. And so now I can get really specific. If I know it's a PDF that I'm looking for, if I'm searching for a site, so when we get a much larger SharePoint infrastructure, I can search by site, by people, by files. So I can really kind of get to the files that I'm looking for very, very quickly. And once you use SharePoint for multiple years, this can become an invaluable tool to be able to get to the data that you're looking for. Bear with me 1 second here. I want to make sure I show you guys everything that I wanted to show you. All right, so let's really quickly go back to our sales and marketing site, and I'll go to the back here and get back to the home page. So what else can I do in SharePoint? If documents are the big thing, because that's how we all get here, what else can I add? So if I click new, and you can see that the most common things, a list, which is just a custom list of data, I'll show that in a second, a page that will show up in the pages section, a news post that'll show up here at the top in news, a link, which is these links, a project plan, a plan, or an app. So I'm going to go app because that's going to show me all the things that I can add here. And you'll see it's huge, right? So if a lot of things also that people don't realize, you can have multiple document libraries. So if I had, let's just use an example of a project site, I can have a document library that's for internal project related documents. But if I'm also sharing this site with my clients, then I could create another project library, or sorry, document library for files that are available to the client, which let's say maybe it's the contract that we have with that client, or the weekly status updates that we create in Microsoft Word, and we upload them every time, and so they can have access to that. So we can get very kind of complex or very simple as it relates to SharePoint sites. A wiki, if you guys are familiar with Wikipedia, there is a wiki engine built inside of SharePoint where everyone can edit data in a very unstructured way and relate data to each other so that you can build very quickly and easily build documentation or standards and procedures, SOPs, any organizational documents that need to live online but that aren't really Word documents, but you want them to be searchable and available kind of inside of SharePoint. You can build a wiki library. A library for pictures, which adds a slideshow component to normally a document library, so that way, just like you might browse through pictures, you can do that online as well. A links list, which like we talked about on the homepage there, might be a set of links to the applications you use most often, or to some other data around the web. Announcements. So, let's say you have a SharePoint homepage for your company, and that's called company. And every time that, you have something new you want to tell people about, you put it in the announcements and send that out. And so then they can see all of the announcements and go back and search through previous announcements. Contacts. So a list of contacts, kind of like you would have an Outlook for your personal needs. But if you were on that project again, you might want to share all of the different subject matter experts, the sponsor for the project, those kind of things. Those would be good things to store in a contact list. A calendar of events for whatever it is that you're doing. So maybe it's an HR calendar of birthdays, or a calendar for the project, including the go live date and all the milestones, and on it goes. So I'm not going to go through all of them because there's a lot more. The only other one I'll highlight is a custom list, because I'm going to demonstrate that in just a little bit. So you can create, think about it like Excel online, but without all of the burden of Excel, to be able to store data and track data online with your employees. So there's lots and lots of capabilities. And what I thought I would do for the last few minutes of our demo together is to show you some real world examples from LogicSpeak that we use SharePoint for, just to give you some ideas that how you might be able to integrate SharePoint and more than just document libraries into your workflow. So I'm going to switch over to LogicSpeak's side of things. So now I'm logged in as LogicSpeak, so you can see that our logo is at the top here. And so this is real world. This is the SharePoint Empowerment webinar we're demoing or doing right now, and I just made changes a few minutes ago. So let's talk through some examples. Firstly, here in our company site, which is the one that we use for our internal company, here is a calendar of birthdays, and I'll pull the drop down so you can see all of the different things that we store here. So I've created filters for client anniversaries so that we know when our clients, when their anniversary rolls over every year with LogicSpeak. Employee anniversaries so that we know to celebrate them for their 1, 2, 3 year anniversary. Client birthday or employee birthdays so that we can track when to wish them a happy birthday. any company holidays that we might have so that our employees know when they're going to be off, although that's not generally a problem. Any current events or meetings that we might have that are company-wide, and then any of our, if you guys are clients of LogicSpeak, you recognize our success team with our logical business reviews as well as our alignment reviews. So we have one single calendar, but we can filter that down based on whatever type of information that we're looking for. So if I go to birthdays, notice some things go away, and I just am looking at the birthdays of our employees that happened this month. So that can be a really helpful way to kind of see a lot of different calendar data in one place. There's other ways to skin this cat. A lot of people have shared calendars and Outlook and calendars and Teams and things like that. But this is just one way, and there are some really nice kind of web-based use cases, including filtering and different customizations that you can do in SharePoint. So that's one example. Another example is our client services. So we have a SharePoint site for all of our clients, and as you can see, or grouped together, and as you can see here, then we have a client services custom list that we track a lot of information about our clients, including what level they are, standard or express, whether or not they've signed up for our NOC services, what their communication or collaboration platform is, so whether it's Office 365 or G Suite. Whether or not they use Azure, what their voice platform is, and on and on and on it goes. So we use this internally to know, when our employees are wanting to reach out to a client and try to help with something, then they can come here for very easy access to the services that the client uses. And so we created this list as a custom list and added the columns and the data types that we wanted, so that way we had all of the things that we needed on there. Showing a site example, this is our human resources site, or our HR site. And the reason I wanted to demo this is because this is an example where we've customized the permissions for our uses. This has internal HR data. So as you can imagine, employee salaries, hire dates, start dates, their offer letters, their I-9 information, all of those things that you would track about employees. But of course, we don't let our entire employee base access that. Only our HR team has access to that. But this homepage, everyone has access to. And so we have articles, so setting communications across our company, FAQs about our benefits that we rolled out, for 2021, a presentation about who we are and our mission statement. So that's kind of the featured articles. We also have a set of links to all of the different things that, from an HR perspective, you might be interested in. Our benefits provider or broker, the company calendar I demoed before. We created a separate section all related to information that we disseminated around COVID-19, including every single communication that we emailed to our employees, so that if they needed to go back and read what the policy or the update was around our holiday party, then they can do that, as well as any official state of Georgia COVID links or links to information from the CDC. So we were able to create a COVID-19 site. As soon as the pandemic hit, we spun this up really quickly, and as you can see, over the months, we kept posting information here. So that's a really good use case for how you can use SharePoint to quickly and easily disseminate information. So going back, and just some more information, our payroll provider is Gusto, a link to our employee handbook that's online, as well as some of the other systems that we use. Employees' favorite part, paid time off in terms of company holidays, how they request PTO, and then our policies. And then this resources is a set of document library that gives them information about benefits, so forms that they might need to fill out, open enrollment, vision elections, and all the things. So they have access to that. But we have an internal document library called Documents that, is the internal side of things. So like I said, the employee information, our recruiting, the new hire packet, all of that. So normal employees who are not HR members wouldn't have access to this. And I only see this because I'm logged in as me. Any one of our users, let's say Levi, who some of you know, if he logged in, he wouldn't even see this document link. He would see resources and only resources. So this has been a really big benefit to us internally. Instead of sending out emails multiple times and having lots and lots of employees as we hire people ask, where is this and where is that, we can just give them access to this one site, point them here, and they go and find the information that they need. So it's been really, really beneficial. A couple of other things, or one other thing that I wanted to show you, which is a little bit more advanced, is the integration of Microsoft Forms, which you may or may not be familiar with. If you've ever filled out a Google form that you've been sent by somebody, this is Microsoft's version of that. It's called Forms, really creative name. And this is a project request form. So when we talk to our clients and our client expresses a need for a project, or we make a recommendation for a project because of something that we notice at a client, then our client success manager will come and submit this, and it'll go to our optimized project team so that they can generate the estimate or the project initiation agreement. So simple form, you fill it out, who's the company, who's the contact at that company, what's the name of the project, where did we get this from, related data, if there was a ticket or a project that a previous project that we were referring to, what's the business need, et cetera, right? What are the components of the project? So once this is submitted, we have some scripting behind the scenes that then will copy that data and submit it into this custom list of data so that we can track the project request all the way through to when it finally becomes a project. So you'll notice here, Bugs Bunny submitted a couple of them, but Carrot migration to Office 365, and you can see I filled out some sample data here. So that now is editable, where I can then edit that, change the status to PIA needed, waiting signature, signed, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to reject this one. But so that then allows us to not just get the data in a digital fashion, but to actually work with the data as well. And then also to notify our project team, we integrated with Microsoft Teams. And here you can see that this form that was submitted now shows up in Teams as well, so that people who work in Teams all day long then see that a new project request has been submitted, and they can work with that data as quickly as possible. So that gets you integration from forms all the way through from SharePoint and then to Teams for notifications. And we could even do more things with that in terms of sending out email notifications. Once we get that data submitted, we can do all kinds of really great things with that. So that kind of is the whole enchilada in terms of using SharePoint, but then having it kind of participate in workflows that might make your organization more streamlined, more efficient, and certainly more productive. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about as we finish up our time together is really the ability to share data outside of your organization. So if we go back to our sales and marketing home in our document library, you don't just have to share data inside of your organization or your company. If you work with vendors, partners, customers, and you want to participate or have them participate with you instead of emailing documents around, if I go to any one of these documents, and we'll use this PowerPoint, then there is a share link almost everywhere inside of SharePoint. So if I click share, then this window is going to pop open and give me options for how am I going to share this data. So I'll just talk through them really quickly. So by policy, this one has been disabled in the site because it's a demo site. But if I don't know who it's going to, and I want to include it to 30 or 40 people, and so somebody's going to forward it around, I can do anyone, which is anonymous, or people inside my company who get the link. So I can forward it inside the company, but people outside the company can't use it. People with existing access, if I just want them to know about the fact that I've updated a document, but they already have access and they're just going to go and open the document, or let's do specific people. And this allows me to send an email to anyone around the organization so that, or outside the company, to allow them to edit or view a document that is in SharePoint. So I'm going to pick specific people. If I turn off allow editing, it's just read only, and they can view the document, but they can't make changes. And then I can also even say they can't even download it. So they can view it on the web, but if I try to download it, it's not going to let me save that Word document, Excel document, PDF, or something like that. So I'm going to allow editing and turn off block download. And so I'm going to click apply, and then now I can type in some user. It can either be in my company or it can be outside of my company. So if it's outside of my company, let me do my Gmail just to prove. So it's going to say, it's going to pull up the email address. And then when I pick them, it's going to say jason.etheridge@gmail.com is outside of your organization. That's okay. We're okay doing that. I can type a message. Hey, Jason, please review our presentation and let me. Okay. And then I can click send, and it's going to go. Microsoft is going to actually send my Gmail account an email letting me know that I have access to this file. But if you would rather control the email that goes to your clients or your partners and you want to share it, you still can do that as well. So if I click share, I'm going to do specific people, allow editing, and I'm going to type in jason.etheridge@outlook.com, which should be an unknown. There we go. And so instead, I'm going to click copy link. And that's going to copy that link to my clipboard, and I can then paste that into an email that I already have typed up with a summary of the work that we completed, a summary of the project, a sales proposal, and click here to download the documents. Whatever the case may be, I now have a link. It's still only going to work for the people I specified, but I can paste that in the email and send it on, and then people will have access that way, and I get to format the email in a way that makes more sense to me and my customers. So that is essentially how to share data inside of a SharePoint site with people outside your organization or people inside your organization. You can also share an entire site with people, and that's done, kind of at the site level over here with the membership. So if you click add members here, you can see this is my demo tenant. And so we've got 20 people who have access to the sales and marketing site. This must be a pretty big company. So I can add members right there as the owner of the site, both internal and external, and then they would have access to the entire site. Okay, so we've covered SharePoint, the differences between SharePoint and Office 365, how to view and edit data online, as well as to sync it to our computers. We talked about some additional functionality that we can add to SharePoint sites besides just document libraries. We talked about how to share data with both people inside of our company and with people outside of our company. And we also looked at some real world examples of how SharePoint is really being used to make an organization, and in this case, LogicSpeak, more efficient and to get data to the right people as quickly and effectively as possible. So I hope that was helpful. I'm sure there's lots and lots more that we could talk about. There really is. This is really just the surface of the power of SharePoint. There's a lot of automation that can be done. You can be alerted anytime data changes on a site, so you can get email notifications and things like that. But I wanted to allow plenty of time for questions and so that I could answer your questions. So I'm going to hop back over to my PowerPoint presentation and open it up. You probably are muted. So if you are, feel free to unmute yourself. And if you'd like to ask a question, we'll be happy to, when we go to questions, then I'll go back to helpful information as well. So any questions and things that I could demo, maybe things that aren't working for you that I can talk about, and I'm happy to do that now.
Jason, Kate asked if you can show how to manage the site versus document library permissions.
Absolutely. So let me hop back over to SharePoint. That's a great question. Now, again, just specifically, Kate, you have to be an owner or have owner level permissions for that site to be able to manage the site. I'm going to hop back out here and go to the project site, because that way it's a private group.
Yeah, you actually kind of did it, I think, right after I asked, but my problem is that I don't have the share button on the project or document library. That's the left thing. So, but I'm an owner of the group. So see your share button up there at the top? Ooh, it just changed.
Yeah, correct. So that's a very good distinction. So I appreciate you asking that question. If I have something selected, one or more things, notice because it's a folder and a bunch of files, I don't see share. But if I have one thing selected, then I can click share, right? And so that's the same functionality that I have when I click share here. But if I want to share the entire site, then that's going to be at the member level and adding membership. So it's a little bit.
What about a document library though? Like you want to only share the document library.
Yep. So that is a different, by default, permissions at the document library level are inherited from the site. So this document library is shared to the same people that the sales and marketing thing is. So by adding a member at the root, I'm adding someone to documents. And you won't see it in this menu system, unfortunately. But if I were to, I'm trying to think, yeah, no, they haven't added it. If I return to classic SharePoint, you're going to see this really pretty view of my document library change overnight. Boom, now it's the previous view, but I get this menu up at the top, right? And I can click shared with, and it's going to tell me the people that it's shared with, right? And then I can click invite people, and it's going to share just the document library with those people.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes.
Microsoft has done a really good job. I didn't talk because I wanted to spend enough time kind of into the meaty demo part, but I could talk about the history of SharePoint, and it goes back way far, like 15, 20 years, where SharePoint was a standalone web application that you installed on your server in your office. And so over the years, Microsoft has continued to maintain a lot of the same functionality, but they've made it look more kind of new and kind of fit the style of sites of 2021 and that kind of thing. And so what you're seeing here is that this is the old, what SharePoint would have looked like 4 or 5 years ago, and they just haven't yet migrated all these features into what's the new experience. So you can always flip back and forth between classic SharePoint or the classic experience and the new experience.
Cool.
Thanks. That's a great question. I hadn't thought of demoing the classic SharePoint because it's frankly ugly, and but it's got a lot more features that you don't have in the new experience. Great question. Any other questions? If not, I've got a few pre-submitted questions that we can kind of talk through as well. So one question that was submitted ahead of time is, what if I delete or accidentally erase my data? Can I go back to or restore that? And so I thought I would show that as well. So what I'm going to do here, and I think it should be near real time. So I'm going to click and delete this file that we have. So let me click delete. I'm not sure that it will show up real time, but we'll do our best. If I go back to the recycle bin, then yay, you'll see that this is a file that's no longer available in my document library, but it is still in the recycle bin. And so it's going to stay in the recycle bin. I believe it's roughly 30 days. I could be wrong about that because it's actually editable. You can change the amount of time up to a certain amount. If it's a sensitive file that I deleted and I deleted it on purpose, I can always empty the recycle bin just like you do on your computer. But if it was accidental, I can click on the file and click restore, and then like magic, it is going to be right back where it was. So that doesn't cover you in all cases, especially if, on the way out, an employee, a rogue employee, or somebody, was malicious and it takes you 6 months to find it. That won't cover you. And we have solutions for that in terms of backing up Office 365 for you. So I strongly recommend that. But in terms of, hey, this whole directory is missing. It's, it was gone, a few days ago. We can help you, or you can always go back to the recycle bin and see files that have been deleted and restore them. Another question we get a lot, there's actually a multi-stage. Microsoft keeps kind of moving things further and further away from us as things age. And so if the recycle bin is empty or doesn't have the data that you want and it's been a while, there is a chance that it's in this second stage recycle bin. So if you click that, then that's going to go to the second stage and pull back data that was deleted even further or longer ago, and you can still restore that data as well. So that's deleting and recycling data. Hopefully that's helpful. It's saved many of our clients bacon many times, for sure. Okay. Another question that we got is, how do I get to my Teams enabled or my SharePoint sites that I created when I created a team? I hear that every team has a site associated with it, but I'm not sure how to do that. There are a couple of ways to do that. So if you do have access to your Microsoft Teams, let me demo this on the LogicSpeak side, because that's where I am. So if I open up Teams here on, in my environment, and I go to any one of my document libraries, my channels, then if I click the little the 3 buttons, there's open in SharePoint, and that's going to take me right to the site, to that location inside of SharePoint, right? So I can navigate to it from the home, I can pin it and follow it, so I can get to it via those tiles that I showed you before. Or if I'm already in a team and I want to get to it, then I can go there very, very quickly. It's going to take me right there. Also, I guess it bears mentioning that any site is just a URL, just like any site that you have. So you can always create a bookmark directly to a SharePoint area. So if I go back to the root here, here's my success team. If I add a favorite and if I click favorites and add a favorite, then it's going to be right to this area. The other thing that I like to tell people, by default, every team that you create in Microsoft Teams, if you've used Teams, will have a site created in this sites. So if you know your URL, I happen to always know it's logicspeak.sharepoint.com/sites, and I can get anywhere I want to go. So I can go to sales just by changing that to sales. Or if I want to go to HR, then I can go to HR. So it's a very predictable format for sites that are integrated in Teams. Okay. What other questions do we have? Anything? Okay. Well, I wanted to go back one slide. I should have ordered these better, but some helpful resources. Microsoft actually has, this is one of the things they've done a pretty good job of. They have some really helpful online resources and training. So there's a training home for all of Microsoft 365, support.microsoft.com/ENUS for US content and training. And then there's OneDrive specific training, SharePoint specific training, and then I included a link to the limits of SharePoint. And what I mean by that is, how many documents can I store? How much space can I use? How many folders deep can I go? How many sites can I create? How many document libraries in a site can I create? Like all of the different limits inside of SharePoint. It's not a very pretty format, but you can see by the plan that you currently are, and you can see the limits of all of the SharePoint, the file size, moving and copying data, syncing, like all of the things is in. Kudos to Microsoft for putting it in one single article, which has been super, super helpful. And now I clicked on it and it's not going to be orange anymore. Well, thank you guys so much for being part of our webinar, our SharePoint Empowerment webinar. We do have plans to create 3 or 4 different versions of this that increase in capability. So, intro to SharePoint, beginner's guide to SharePoint, or how to set up SharePoint in an organization, or how to use it, and then all the way down to advanced. So look for more of these coming down the road. I hope it was beneficial for you. My contact information is on the slide here. Again, we'll follow up with an email with the presentation, the recording, as well as my contact information. Feel free to reach out anytime. I love doing these empowerment sessions because most of you are already using or are thinking of using Office 365, and we just want to help you get the most out of what you're already paying for. So we've been doing these for now the last couple of years, both a high-level Office 365 empowerment to let you know kind of what's there, to give you some ideas, and then deep dives like this into some of the different foundational technologies. So if there's something you'd like to see, if there's a webinar that you'd like to see us do on any of the Microsoft 365 suite, we would love to do it. So feel free to reach out. Thanks again so much for being on our webinar today, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.